The Finnish Air Force is one of the branches of the Finnish Defence Forces. Its peacetime tasks are airspace surveillance, identification flights, and production of readiness formations for wartime conditions. As a separate branch of the military, the Finnish Air Force was founded on May 4, 1928, having existed officially since March 6, 1918 as the Army Corps of Aviation. History. The first steps in the history of Finnish aviation were taken with Russian aircraft. The Russian military had a number of early designs stationed in the country, which until the Russian Revolution of 1917 had been part of the Russian Empire. Soon after the declaration of independence, the Finnish Civil War erupted, in which the Soviets-Russians sided with the Reds, the leftist rebels. Finland's White Guard, the Whites, managed to seize a few aircraft from the Russians, but were forced to rely on foreign pilots and aircraft. Sweden refused to send men and material, but individual Swedish citizens came to the aid of the Whites. The editor of the Swedish daily magazine Aftonbladet, Waldemar Langlet, bought an ABL Battros aircraft from the Nordiska Aviatik factory with funds gathered by the Finland's VAR currency NNER organization. This aircraft, the first to arrive from Sweden, was flown via Haparanda on February 25, 1918 by Swedish pilots John Allen Highworth and Per Svanberg currency CK. The aircraft made a stop at Kokkola and had to make a forced landing in Jakobstad when its engine broke down. It was later given the Finnish Air Force designation F2. Swedish Count Erik von Rosen gave the Finnish White government its second aircraft, a Flygvapnet D. Its pilot, Lieutenant Nils Kindberg, flew the aircraft to Vaasa on March 6, 1918, carrying von Rosen as a passenger. As this gift ran counter to the will of the Swedish government, and no flight permit had been given, it resulted in Kindberg receiving a fine of 100 Swedish crowns for leaving the country without permission. This aircraft is considered by some to be the first aircraft of the Finnish Air Force, since the Finnish Air Force did not officially exist during the Civil War, and it was only the Red side who flew a few aircraft with the help of some Russian pilots. The von Rosen aircraft was given the designation F1. The Finnish Air Force is one of the oldest air forces of the world. The RAF was founded as the first independent branch on April 1, 1918 and the Swedish Flygvapnet in 1925. Von Rosen had painted his personal good luck charm on the Flygvapnet D aircraft. This charm, a blue swastika, the ancient symbol of the sun and good luck, was adopted as the insignia of the Finnish Air Force. The white circular background was created when the Finns tried to paint over the advertisement from the Thulin Air Academy. The swastika was officially taken into use after an order by Mannerheim on March 18, 1918. The FiAF changed the insignia after 1944, due to an Allied Control Commission decree prohibiting the existence of pro-Hitler and fascism organizations. The swastika was removed due to the resemblance to the Nazi swastika. The F-1 aircraft was destroyed in an accident, killing its crew, not long after it had been handed over to the Finns. On September 7, 1920, two newly purchased Savoia flying boats crashed in the Swiss Alps en route to Finland, killing all on board. This day has since been the Memorial Day for fallen pilots. The Finnish Air Force assigns the matriculation numbers to its aircraft by assigning each type a two-letter code following by dash and an individual aircraft number. The two-letter code usually refers to the aircraft manufacturer or model, such as HN for FA-18 Hornet, DK for Saab 35 Draken, VN for Valmet Vinkel, etc. The Finnish Civil War 1918, the air activity of the Reds. Most of the air bases that the Russians had left in Finland had been taken over by Whites after the Russian pilots had returned to Russia. The Reds were in possession of a few air bases and a few Russian aircraft, mainly amphibious aircraft. They had 12 aircraft in all. The Reds did not have any pilots themselves, so they hired some of the Russian pilots that had stayed behind. On February 24, 1918, 5 aircraft arrived to Viipuri, and were quickly transferred to Rima currency key. The Reds created air units in Helsinki, Tampere, Kauhavalla, and Viipuri. There were no overall headquarters, but the individual units served under the commander of the individual front line. A flight school was created in Helsinki, but no students were trained there before the fall of Helsinki. 2 of the aircraft, 1 reconnaissance aircraft and 1 fighter aircraft that had arrived to Riihimäe Key was sent to Tampere, and 3 to Kouvola. 4 Russian pilots and 6 mechanics also arrived to Tampere. The first war sortie was flown on March 1, 1918 over Naisten-Lahti. It seems like the Reds also operated 2 aircraft over the Eastern Front. The Reds mainly performed reconnaissance, bombing sorties, spreading of propaganda leaflets, and artillery spotting. The Reds' air activity wasn't a Euro-unregistered trademark T particularly successful. Their air operations suffered from bad leadership, worn-out aircraft, and the unmotivated Russian pilots. Some of the aircraft were captured by the Whites, while the rest were destroyed. The air activity of the Whites: in January 1918 the Whites did not have a single aircraft, nor pilots, so they asked the Swedes for help. Sweden was a neutral nation and it could not send any official help. Sweden also forbid its pilots to go to Finland. However, 1 Marine Solnier Parasol, and 3 NAB Albatros arrived from Sweden by the end of February 1918. 2 of the Albatros aircraft were gifts from persons supporting the White Finnish cause, while the third was bought. It was initially meant that the aircraft would be used to support the air operations of the Whites, but the aircraft proved unsuitable. The Whites also did not have any pilots, so all the pilots and mechanics came from Sweden. One of the Finnish Jarkkaransigers, Lieutenant Bertil Marjenen SSON, had been given pilot training in the Imperial Germany, but he stayed behind in Germany, trying to secure aircraft deals for Finland. During the Civil War the White Finnish Air Force consisted of 29 Swedes. Of the pilots, only 4 had been given military training, as one of them was operating as an observer. 2 Danes, 7 Russians, 28 Finns. The air activity consisted mainly of reconnaissance sorties. The Germans brought several of their own aircraft, but they did not contribute much to the overall outcome of the war. The first Air Force base of independent Finland was founded on the shore near Kulo. The base could operate 3 aircraft. The first aircraft was brought by rail on March 7, 1918, and on March 17, 1918 the first aircraft took off from the base. In 1918, the Finns took over 9 Russian Shtinin M9 aircraft that had been left behind. The first air operation of the Whites during the war was flown over Lille. It was a reconnaissance gathering mission as the front line moved south, towards Tampere. The AFB was moved first to Arivesi and then to Jarkkaransiarvia near Tampere. The contribution of the White Air Force during the war was almost insignificant. From March 10, 1918, the Finnish Air Force was led by the Swedish Lieutenant John Allen Heijerth. He was however replaced on April 18, 1918, due to his unsuitability for the position and numerous accidents. His job was taken over by the German Captain Karl Seber, who commanded the Air Force from April 28, 1918 until December 13, 1918. By the end of the Civil War, the Finnish Air Force had 40 aircraft, of which 20 had been captured from the Reds. 5 of the aircraft had been flown by the Allies from Russia, 4 had been gifts from Sweden and 8 had been bought from Germany. Winter War 1939 Euro 40. The Winter War began on November 30, 1939, when the Soviet Air Force bombed 21 Finnish cities and municipalities. The Soviet Union is estimated to have had about 5,000 aircraft in 1939, and of these, some 700 fighters and 800 medium bombers were brought to the Finnish front to support the Red Army's operations. As with most aerial bombardment of the early stages of WW2, the damage against the Finnish industry and railways was quite limited. At the beginning of the Winter War, the Finnish Air Force was equipped with only 17 bombers and 31 fighters. There were also 54 liaison aircraft, but 20 of these were only used for messengers. The most modern aircraft in the Finnish arsenal were the British-designed Bristol Blenheim bombers that had been licence-built in Finland. The primary fighter aircraft was the Fokker DXXI, a cheap but maneuverable design with fabric-covered fuselage and fixed landing gear. On paper, this force should have been no match for the attacking Soviet Red Air Force. However, the Finnish Air Force had already adopted the Finger 4 formation in mid-30s, which was to be found to be much more effective formation than the V formation that many other countries were still using when WWII began. In order to prevent their aircraft from being destroyed on the ground, the Finns spread out their aircraft to many different airfields and hid them in the nearby forests. The Finns constructed many decoys and built shrapnel protection walls for the aircraft. Soviet air raids on Finnish airfields usually caused little or no damage as a result, and often resulted in interception of the attackers by the Finns as the bombers flew homeward. As the war progressed, the Finns tried desperately to purchase aircraft wherever there were any to be found. This policy resulted in a very diverse aircraft inventory, which was to cause some major logistical problems until the inventory became more standardized. The Finnish Air Force was to consist of numerous American, British, Czechoslovakian, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Soviet, and Swedish designs. Other countries, like South Africa and Denmark, sent aircraft to assist in the Finnish war effort. Many of these purchases and gifts did not arrive until the end of the hostilities, but were to see action later during the Continuation and Lapland Wars. To make up for its weaknesses, the FiAF mainly focused on attacking enemy bombers from directions that were disadvantageous to the enemy. Soviet fighters were usually superior in firepower, speed and agility, and were to be avoided unless the enemy was in a disadvantageous position. A good example of the wisdom of this strategy was the surprise attack on the Imola Air Base in late February 1940 by some 40 Soviet fighters. The Finns were surprised during takeoff and lost 7 planes, 1 Fokker DXXI and 6 Gloucester Gladiators. As a result of these tactics, the Finnish Air Force managed to shoot down 218 Soviet aircraft during the Winter War while losing only 47 to enemy fire. The Finnish anti-aircraft also had 314 confirmed downed enemy planes. 30 Soviet planes were captured. These were kills that landed more or less intact within Finland and were quickly repaired. Continuation War 1941 44. The Finnish Air Force was better prepared for the Continuation War. It had been considerably strengthened and consisted of some 550 aircraft, though many were considered second-rate and thus exportable by their countries of origin. Finland purchased a large number of aircraft during the Winter War, but few of those reached service during the short conflict. Politics also played a factor, since Hitler did not wish to antagonize the Soviet Union by allowing aircraft exports through German-controlled territory during the conflict. New aircraft types were in place by the time hostilities with Soviet Union resumed in 1941. Small numbers of Hawker Hurricanes arrived from the United Kingdom, Marine Saulnier MS 406s from France, Fiat G50s from Italy, a few dozen Curtiss Hawk 75s captured by the Germans in France and Norway then sold to Finland, when Germany began warming up its ties with Finland, and numerous Brewster B-239s from the neutral USA strengthened the FiAF. The FiAF proved capable of holding its own in the upcoming battles with the Red Air Force. Older models, like the Fokker DXXI and Gloucester Gladiator, were replaced in frontline combat units with the new aircraft. The FiAF's main mission was to achieve air superiority over Finland and prevent Soviet air power from reinforcing their front lines. The fighter squadrons were very successful in the Finnish offensive of 1941. A stripped-down, more maneuverable, and significantly lightened version of the American Brewster B-239 Buffalo was the FiAF's main fighter until 1943. Results with this fighter were very good, even though the type was considered to be a failure in the U.S. Navy and with British Far East forces. In the Finnish use, the Brewster had a victory rate of 32-1 459 kills to 15 losses. German Bf-109s replaced the Brewster as the primary frontline fighter of the FiAF in 1943, though the Buffaloes continued in secondary roles until the end of the wars. Other types, especially the Italian Fiat G50 and Curtiss Hawk 75 also proved capable in the hands of well-trained Finnish pilots. Various Russian designs also saw action when lightly damaged kills were repaired and made airworthy. Dornier Do-17s and Junkers Ju-88s improved the bombing capability of the Finnish Air Force. The bomber force was also strengthened with a number of captured Soviet bombers, which had been taken in large numbers by the Germans during Operation Barbarossa. The bomber units flew assorted missions with varying results, but a large part of their time was spent in training, waiting to use their aircraft until the time required it. Thus the bomber squadrons of Flying Regiment 4 were ready for the summer battles of 1944, which included for example the Battle of Tali-Ihantala. While the FiAF was successful in its mission, the conditions were not easy. Spare parts for the FiAF planes were scarce. Euro parts from the US, Britain, and Italy were unavailable for much of the war. Repairs took often a long time, and the State Aircraft Factory was burdened with restoration repair of Soviet war booty planes, foreign aircraft with many hours of flight time, and the development of indigenous Finnish fighter types. Also, one damaged bomber took up workshop space equaling 3 fighters. Finland was required to expel or intern remaining German forces as part of its peace agreement with the Soviets in mid-1944. As a result, the final air battles were against retreating Luftwaffe units. The Finnish Air Force did not bomb any civilian targets during either war. Curiously, overflying Soviet towns and bases was also forbidden, as to avoid any unneeded provocations and to spare equipment. According to Kalevi Keskinen's and Kari Stenman's book Aerial Victories 1-2, the Finnish Air Force shot down 1,621 Soviet aircraft while losing 210 of its own aircraft during the continuation war. Post-WW2. The end of World War II, and the Paris peace talks of 1947 brought with it some limitations to the FiAF. Among these were that the Finnish Air Force were to have no more than 60 combat aircraft, no aircraft with internal bomb bays, no guided missiles or atomic weapons, no weaponry of German construction or with German parts, a personnel of maximum 3,000 persons, no offensive weapons. These revisions followed closely Soviet demands. When Britain tried to add some of their own, they were opposed by the Soviets. The revisions were again revised in 1963 and Finland was allowed to buy guided missiles and a few bombers that were used as target tugs. The FAF also managed to find a loophole to strengthen the capacity by purchasing large numbers of two-seater aircraft, which counted as trainer aircraft and were not included in the revisions. These aircraft could have secondary roles. During the Cold War years, Finland tried to balance its purchases between East, West and domestic producers. This led to a diverse inventory of Soviet, British, Swedish, French and Finnish aircraft. After leading Finnish politicians held unofficial talks with their Swedish counterparts, Sweden began storing surplus Saab 35 Drakens, which were to be transferred to Finland in the event of a war with the Soviet Union. These were kept until the 1980s. On September 22, 1990, a mere week before the unification of Germany, Finland declared that the limiting treaties were no longer active and that all the provisions of the Paris peace treaties were nullified. The signatory states abstained from diplomatic notes regarding the declaration, which thus confirmed the nullification. Today, the FAF is organized into 3 air defense wings, each assigned to one of the 3 air defense areas into which Finland is divided. The main wing bases are at Rovaniemi, Tampere and Kuopio-Risla, each with 1 frontline squadron. Pilot training is undertaken at the Central Flying School, Kauhava, with advanced conversion performed at squadron level. Aircraft inventory. Aircraft, the primary fighter of the Air Force is the F-18 Hornet. Training is done with Valmet Vinkers and BAE Hawks. Transport is done with C-295s and PC-12s. Some aircraft are scheduled for replacement. The Fokker F-27s will continue to serve side by side with the C-295 milliseconds but are due to be replaced in a few years' time. The Hawk Mk-51s and 51s are to be replaced by new planes of a so far unknown model in the next decade, and as an interim solution Swiss Mk-66s have been purchased. The Finnish Air Force also planned to purchase 2 Euro 3 larger transport aircraft, to fulfill the requirements for domestic operations and for troop and logistics transports in international operations, as well as to form a tactical reserve for the evacuating of people from hazardous areas. The suggestions ranged from the Airbus A330 MRTT, Airbus A400M to the C-17 Globemaster III. On March 25, 2008, it was decided that Finland would join NATO's Strategic Airlift Capability Program, which comprises a joint purchase of 3 C-17s by the new NATO countries in Sweden and Finland. F-18 Hornet. The F-18 Hornet is the Finnish Air Force variant of the McDonnell Douglas F-A-18 Hornet multi-role attack and fighter aircraft. The aircraft is almost identical to a late FD used by the U.S. Navy, as well as the Hornets used by the Swiss Air Force, although no air-to-ground equipment or weapons were purchased with the aircraft. The decision to rename the aircraft to F-18 was mainly a political decision to underline the air defense role of the fighters. The decision to purchase the aircraft was made in 1992, soon after the 1991 dissolution of the Soviet Union. The original plan was to buy about 40 Western fighters and about 20 Soviet fighters, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of policy of Finlandization, this was no longer necessary. The plan changed to 60 single-seat plus 7 dual-seat fighters of the same type, and the F-18 won the contest. To keep the budget, the number of fighters to be purchased was decreased by 3, to 57 plus 7. The 57 single-seat aircraft were produced in Finland by Patria. A key goal in the Finnish foreign policy of that era was to take no action that might be interpreted by the Soviets as a security threat. A weapons purchase of this magnitude certainly applied. Buying only NATO-compatible, American fighter jets was not possible for Finland before the USSR's collapse. The F-18 Hornet is the second U.S. Navy fighter in the Finnish Air Force, following the 1939 purchase of the Brewster F-2A. In October 2014, the Finnish broadcaster Yle reported that a replacement or upgrade for the Hornet was being investigated. Attack capability upgrade. On December 7, 2004, the Finnish Air Force announced that the aircraft will be modified to improve their ground attack capability. The modifications will include upgrades to radars, avionics and sensors, and a number of advanced weapons will be tried out. Additionally, the FiAF has obtained 250 AIM-9X and 300 AIM-120C7 AMRAAM missiles. In December 2007, it was announced that the FiAF had purchased 10 ANAAQ-28 Lightning AT Block II pods, which were to be integrated with its F-18s. In April 2009, it was announced that the Air Force was considering both the AGM-158 JASSM and the Taurus missile for the aircraft. In March 2012, the Finnish Defence Forces placed an order valued at €178.5 million for an unspecified number of AGM-158C missiles and the requisite software upgrades, training missiles and documentation for their F-18s. Some 11 AGM-158C missiles with unitary warheads and 96 JDAM kits have so far been purchased. F-18C to F-18D conversion. One Finnish Air Force F-18C was destroyed and one heavily damaged in a mid-air collision in 2001. The Finnish Air Force decided to purchase the front fuselage of a Canadian Air Force F-18B and use it to modify the damaged F-18C into a two-seat F-18D variant. The transformation was completed in 2009. The aircraft crashed during a test flight on January 21, 2010 due to stabilizer servo motor failure that caused the fighter's computer to switch to mechanical steering. The pilots had to eject because they were unable to gain control of the aircraft due to the failure. Helicopters. The Finnish Air Force operated helicopters until the end of the 1990s when all were transferred to the Army Wing. All helicopters are attached to the Utti Jaeger Regiment's helicopter battalion at Utti Jaeger Regiment. Helicopter types include Hughes 500D, Hughes 500E and 20 NH-90. UAVs. All UAVs are currently operated by the Army's Artillery Brigade. The UAV unit is stationed in Niinisalon. The Army operates the AUAG Ranger. Patria has also developed a mini UAV, which has been field-tested by the Finnish Army. Organization. The Air Force is organized into 3 air commands, each of which operates a fighter squadron. In addition, the Air Force includes a number of other units, Headquarters, C4I Materiel Command, Lapland Air Command Fighter Squadron November 1st Flight, F-18CD, 2nd Flight, F-18CD, Communications Flight, Valmet Vinca, PC-12NG, Valmet L-90TP ready go. 5th Sector Operations Center, Base Support Company, C4I Workshop, Aircraft Workshop. Satakunta Air Command Fighter Squadron 21, 1st Flight, F-18CD, 2nd Flight, F-18CD, Communications Flight, Valmet Vinca, PC-12NG, Valmet L-90TP ready go. 3rd Sector Operations Center, Aircraft Workshop, C4I Materiel Center, Logistics Center, Base Support Company. Caroline Air Command, Fighter Squadron 31, 1st Flight, F-18CD, 2nd Flight, F-18CD, Communications Flight, Valmet Vinca, PC-12NG, Valmet L-90TP ready go. 7th Sector Operations Center. Training Air Wing Fighter Squadron 41, Hawk Mk-51 51st A, 61, Training Center, Course Detail, Base Support Company. Logistics Center, Aircraft Workshop, C4I Workshop. Air Force Academy Supporting Air Operations Squadron, Training Center, Training Battalion, Electronic Warfare Training Center, Air Force Band, Logistics Center, Guard Detail, C4I Workshop, Logistics Center. Air Force Materiel Command, Air Command, C4I Materiel Command. Aircraft and Weapon Systems Training Wing Course Detail, Training Detail, Training Company, Aircraft and Weapon Systems NCO School. Logistics Center. Finnish Intelligence Research Establishment, Tikkakoski, Mobilized Strength, 3 Fighter Squadrons F-18CD, 1 Fighter Squadron Hawk, 6 Readiness Bases, 1 Support Squadron, 7 Communications Flights, total of 38,000 personnel, commanders. See also, List of World War II aces from Finland, List of Air Forces, references. Shores, Christopher. Finnish Air Force, 1918–1968. Reading, Berkshire, UK, Osprey Publications Limited. ISBN A978-0668021210. External links, Finnish Air Force, pictures of Finnish Air Force aircraft at airliners.net, Finnish Defence Forces, presentation of equipment, interceptor fighter, Flug review article about the Swiss Air Force's F-18s.